karanasan ko po, tingnan ba nakasalanan natin dito?
Media educators are warning calls to defend press freedom.
This corruption in media will introduce
Since Typhoon Yolanda hit the eastern Visayas region last month, efforts in bringing awareness to the needs of the victims were raised. More so, the need for immediate action to bring relief. Many local and international organizations, as well as personalities, have turned to social media in asking for donations in kind and in cash, while some have turned to more creative ways of providing aid to the victims. Like internationally renowned photographer Manny Librodo, who turned to Facebook and offered to give a photo tour and shoot entitled Click by Click, Brick by Brick, an open shoot and photo walk for a cause for the benefit of the victims of Typhoon Yolanda in northern Iloilo and Panay. Social media personality Gang Badoy and her organization Rock Ed asked for donations in the form of underwear and sanitary napkins on top of basic necessities like food and water. Legal Help Desk's resident lawyers also lent a hand for the victims of Typhoon Yolanda. Attorney Karen Jimeno volunteered her time and cooked for the evacuees of Tacloban and Camp Crame, while attorney Rod Nepomuceno volunteered for the Oplan Hatid operations. There is still more that needs to be done in order for the residents of the affected areas in eastern Visayas to have their lives back. And it is not entirely impossible if we all work together to lend a hand. Good evening. You're watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel. Sitting in for Jing Magsaysay, I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Tonight, we will be talking to the representatives of organizations and companies who have been providing relief to the victims of Typhoon Yolanda. One of those organizations is Save the Children. And we're joined today by Ned Only, Country Director, and April Sumailo, Communications Officer and a survivor herself. Good evening, and thank you both for being here today.
Good evening.
So before we get into the actual efforts that Save the Children is doing, I'd like to ask Ned to tell us a little bit about Save the Children and how you came to the Philippines.
Oh, sure. I've actually only been here a little more than 2 months. So,
Oh.
so I was received by Typhoon Yolanda.
What a welcome.
What a welcome. But Save the Children was founded in 1919, almost 100 years old, based out of crisis, out of mass starvation in Central Europe, and around the world and in dozens of countries. Save the Children has responded to emergencies just this year. So I'm relatively new here and came from Africa, from Ethiopia, where we were responding to a pretty significant crisis there.
You just arrived from Kenya yourself.
And we were in the middle of a famine response there. Yeah.
Right. So how did you come to the Philippines? It was 1982 that Save the Children started in the Philippines, is that right?
That's right. And I don't know if at the time we were responding to an emergency, but based on our look at children's needs, we felt that we could add value to improving the condition of children here.
So apart from disaster response, what does Save the Children focus on? I know you do nutrition and livelihood as well.
That's right. Well, we're the leading independent organization for children. Depending on the needs of children in any given country, we'll do development and humanitarian response. So I think here, definitely nutrition, education are very important for us, health as well, and preparing communities to respond to disaster, which is incredibly pertinent to this day.
Yes. Well, Speaking of disaster, let's talk about what Save the Children is doing right now. What are your priorities currently? Now, it's been about over a month since Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines. What are you focusing on now?
Well, those first days and the first couple of weeks, it's life-saving. We talk about food, water, shelter. Those immediate needs are now starting to wane, and we're in the early recovery phase of our response. I think if you go out into communities like we have and we are on the ground, communities are saying to us two things. They're saying we need shelter and we need our livelihoods back. So that's really the focus. So many people have lost their homes. It's over 1.2 million homes have either been destroyed or damaged. That's almost 6 million people. And at least that many number have lost their livelihood. So that's really our focus. If you want to get communities up and going again, you got to take care of shelter and livelihood.
Right. Well, someone lost shelter. April, when you were there yourself, you were supposed to be setting up to prepare for Typhoon Yolanda. What was your experience?
Well, it was a very difficult experience, I must say. The whole place was just devastated.
So you actually
Just,
went there to respond?
Yeah, we were there 24 hours before the Typhoon Haiyan hit because we wanted to immediately assess the situation and see what we can do about it. And so, and then we didn't realize that, because we thought that our building was really safe. It was a really structurally sound building. And then,
This was in Palo? Or
yeah, this is
yes,
in
Palo
Palo
Leyte,
Leyte.
yes.
And we were actually surprised that when Haiyan made its landfall, then everything was just destroyed. You know, we didn't have a roof at the end of the day. At that time, everything was just shaking. The wind just got really strong, and I've never seen anything like that. It was just like a hurricane and tornado all together. It was really difficult to imagine. And at that time, we were thinking to ourselves, you know, we could just imagine what the children are going through. We were very concerned about them.
Right. I mean, how could you think about helping them when you were scared? How are we going to help ourselves, right?
Yeah, but I think, like what I've been saying earlier, I think what really kept us going is the fact that we know that there are more people there who are more vulnerable, who need our help more than anything.
Yes.
So we can always go back to our lives and continue.
Well, thank goodness for
Yes,
you guys.
yes,
I
but
heard-
then,
Yes. go
yeah,
ahead.
but then the thing is that these children have nothing left with them.
Right. Well, there was a time that you lost communications, right? Ned and the rest could not even reach you. You are the first responders. What do you do? I mean, what was the first thing you did? The storm passed. Finally, you could get through to your work. What did you do?
I think first of all, we tried to get ourselves together, you know, look into the situation first. When we came out, we actually confirmed everything that we have thought at the time the typhoon was shaking the whole building. And we saw that the whole place just broke down. The systems were not running anymore.
Place was wiped out,
it was
basically.
like really catastrophic, you know,
Yes.
like you can just see the children, they were so confused. Some of them were crying. And when you talk to them, some of them couldn't communicate very well anymore.
Traumatized,
Yeah.
huh?
And we talked to them, we talked to some of them, and they said that they don't have any food. Some of them were scavenging for food and water. Yeah, so that's really difficult.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we try to do is there's this virtuous circle, is you've got to get people on the ground to assess the conditions. So just because there's been a large typhoon doesn't mean there's going to be large impact on the lives of the population. Sometimes there is catastrophe, like we saw with Yolanda, sometimes less so. So April was part of an advanced typhoon response team. And their role was really to assess the damage and communicate back so that we could then send assistance, resources, more staff down. But because it was so catastrophic, we lost communications and we lost touch with them, and then there was a period of time that they were in a really perilous situation. So
Right.
we've definitely learned some lessons from that. But really thanks to April and others who are willing to put their lives on the line to respond to the needs of children. I think that's really our goal as an organization. That's where we should be.
Mm-hmm. So where are you at now? So at the moment you're trying to set up temporary schools, and basically you call them child-friendly places, right?
Yes.
Tell us about this kind of relief work that you're now doing
Sure.
for them.
We know from evidence around the world that in the days after a big catastrophe, a big natural disaster, children are at their greatest risk of abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. And if there aren't emergency systems established to protect children, then those conditions could result in what I previously
Yes.
mentioned. So a child-friendly space is a place almost like a preschool or a kindergarten, so that when parents are looking for lost ones, they're trying to find food and water, they can know that their children are safe under the protection of Save the Children while they are trying to survive. So the child-friendly spaces is critical. Education is critical as well. So establishing temporary schools. We know that so many schools were absolutely destroyed. Setting up temporary schools, generally a tent, generally nearby the old school, so that schools can get up and running, giving children a sense of normalcy
Yes.
and returning to a learning environment is critical.
Right, especially now that the holidays are coming along,
Yeah.
no? And the Filipinos just love the celebrations.
Yeah.
How are you also, in terms of bringing the communities together to feel this festive spirit, what does Save the Children do, or something like that?
Well,
April?
it's a good question. I mean, I don't think we've gotten there yet. We're getting closer.
Yes.
I think in the schools and in the safe play areas, I think Christmas will have to be a theme, of
Yes.
joy, of hopefulness, of looking forward. It's not how you celebrate Christmas in an environment like this. I don't think we've
Right.
really thought through, but I think it's important to get that sense of normalcy again. Yeah.
How many children would you say you've reached, in these different areas?
Well, our numbers right now, we've reached over 80,000 children. That's changing. Multiple different interventions have different levels of beneficiaries. But yeah, over 80,000 children. We're not as far as we need to be. We're expanding the reach every day. But comparing to other emergencies around the world, we've reached more children faster than any other emergency that I can remember.
Now that you've mentioned that, can you give us a picture, Ned, of these different disasters that you've been exposed to yourself and how it compares to this situation now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm incredibly impressed with the resiliency of the population of Visayas and Leyte and Panay. If you go down there today, you will not see a population that's just waiting for assistance. You see active municipal governments. You see active communities. People are busy putting their lives back together. Commerce is working. Roads are open. So even 2 weeks after the typhoon, you saw activity,
Right.
and you saw that progress was being made. It's not a hopeless situation at all. In fact, I've seen many other emergencies around the world, either during warfare and conflict, drought, or natural disasters, where you have a population that's really dispirited, and you don't see that with this population.
That's very heartening to
Yeah.
hear
Yeah.
because, I think people have been very critical of that. Yes, April, you were there yourself. So
Yeah, and I
that
might
like?
just add, it didn't really take a week actually. I mean, even in the second or third day, you
You
can
saw
really
it,
see
huh?
that
Yes.
they are already making makeshift tents, and they're actually trying to salvage some of the things from their homes. So it's really something good.
Yeah, if you look closely and you go down to these communities, you would see it looks like a huge amount of debris, but you then see the debris is ordered. You see the lumber kind of placed, the metal sheeting stacked. You start to see people collecting what's left.
Right.
So yeah, people are moving forward.
That's good to see. I think many people who have been looking at the news on social media, people who haven't been there on the ground, they're very critical, I mean, I guess it's frustrating that you want to see help fast and really reaching everybody. But you yourselves who've been there, what would you say, should have been done different? I mean, maybe the challenges first, talk about maybe the biggest challenges, and then maybe later on, what could have been done different?
Yeah. Well, let me just say that this was such a catastrophic emergency. It's doubtful that anyone was sufficiently prepared. So when I'm talking about local government, federal government, humanitarian organizations, international organizations, this caught everyone by surprise, the level of the catastrophe. I think that because the majority of the response is put on the shoulders of the municipal government here in the Philippines, that municipal government in Tacloban was really destroyed. So many of their staff lost their lives that in the first days we were seeing maybe only 20% of the staff, a very small percentage of the staff were actually going to work. And that is understandable, that is reasonable. People are looking for their lost loved ones. You can't expect that the municipal government in that instance would be able to respond effectively. So I think the mechanisms to be able to say, hey, this is bigger than our capacity to respond to. So how quickly can the federal authorities, national authorities come in?
Right.
I think that's certainly something that everyone should be reflecting on.
Yes.
But because there was, the airport was absolutely destroyed and roads in were covered with debris, it was really difficult to get in there. And I'm not sure that many of us could have been prepared.
Yeah. Well, I'll stop you there for a while, and
Yeah.
we were leaving people hanging, but we have much more to talk about. We'll take a quick break. We still have so much to discuss with our guests. News Cafe will return after these messages. You're still watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel, and we're still joined by our guests, Ned Only and April Sumailo of Save the Children. So earlier, we were talking about the current situation in Tacloban after the typhoon hit, and Ned, you were saying that you work very closely with the local government. How is it going now? I mean, initially, of course, there were many challenges, so where are you at now?
Well, early on, the municipal governments were still just trying to figure out their role and the impact on the local population. I think what we see now is a very active development partner, a partner that's active in deciding, what resources should go where and when. I think we found that our coordination has been effective with municipal governments in Panay and Leyte and Samar. So I think it's a different situation now than it was back in early November. Yeah.
And everyone is so focused on Tacloban, but you are focusing your efforts specifically in 3 areas. Can you tell us how you chose these areas and what those areas are?
Sure. Looking at need. So certainly Tacloban, devastation, but we saw so much media attention and so many resources going into Tacloban and south of Tacloban, Palo, and those other areas, that when we started to look outward, we saw that there was much less assistance going to Panay. And so we set up a base of operations in Estancia. Estancia and those islands were really, really devastated there. And on top of the damage to Estancia, then there was an oil spill. I think many of your viewers may be aware of that, and I had a chance to see that. It's really toxic devastation for children. I mean, one of the areas that was most affected by the oil spill is right at a school. So there was something like 2,000 people that had to be evacuated to another area. Well, we were looking at impact and where assistance was going and whether there was sufficient assistance in those areas. So Estancia, Rojas, Ormoc, as well as Tacloban are areas of focus. Yeah.
So what do you do specifically to help children overcome this trauma? I mean, April, you yourself, you went through that trauma. What are the steps to helping these children in that situation?
And I think the most important step that Save the Children has done was to really set up this child-friendly spaces where it actually serves as both education and play for them, so that they will be able to not actually forget, but have this feeling that everything is going back to normal. Yes. So I think that's very critical for the children. And that they are able to read stories again, that they are able to talk to each other, and that they're able to express themselves, especially immediately after the typhoon hit.
Yeah. How many children are you planning to reach, hopefully, with your program, and how long is this program going
So Save the Children is planning to reach 760,000 individuals, and that includes more than 500,000 children. So, and in these areas which Ned mentioned earlier.
Right. And of course, rehabilitation takes a long time. How long do you think that this program or this campaign is going to go for?
Definitely we'll be here for 3 years. And that would include, of course, the early recovery until the rehabilitation phase.
Right. So will you be going back and forth?
Yes, definitely. I'd love to, if I'll be allowed.
But for you, April, if I may ask, because you yourself went through something very difficult. How is it, having been a survivor of this event, and then now going back there to a place of such devastation where you must have been worried for your life? What is it like now going back there and then having to work in the situation?
I think, just like what I said earlier, I must say that the situation there at that time was really, really frightening. And I was thinking that I might have died, Yeah. But then I went back here, I got some good rest, and was really able to look into the situation. And I think it's just like what Save the Children is doing, just really commit yourself to just working in those areas. And you yourself, you're back to normal, and these people need more help. Yeah.
It's very inspiring. Yeah, you're working for something bigger, basically.
Yeah,
than
that's
yourself. Yeah.
it. Like you look at the bigger picture. You're just one part of the picture. You know,
Yes.
if these people were able to get back on their feet, you know, without outside assistance, what more with me, you know, that I was able to go back to my family and was able to see my friends again.
There's
So
still so much to be done, huh?
yes, there's still so much to be done, and we're here and we're committed to help them.
Yes. Well, knowing what you know now, what would you have done different? What do you think could have been done different? You know.
Let me just say that there's a lot of reflection that we are doing as an organization. I think personally as professionals, I think as an organization, when so many people die, you have to think, did we do enough? Did we do the right things? I think that the international community would have to also reflect on, you know, we had a Category 5 super typhoon which was heading toward the Philippines. I think our appetite for risk is probably, we're conservative. We hold back. We wait to see what kind of damage is done. And I think in this case, we probably had sufficient information to know that it was going to be catastrophic. So, you know, I think we would make some different decisions in terms of the team that went down there. I think we would have positioned them in a different way. But I think, you know, we should have pre-positioned, and the humanitarian community should have pre-positioned resources ahead of time, instead of waiting to hear the news that something had happened, then taking several days to move forward and respond. I mean, I think there's a lot of self-reflection on how we could have done things better.
And that's the way to move forward. We
That's
have
right.
to improve all the time.
That's right.
But for you, Ned, I mean, I did ask this earlier, but comparing this situation to the rest of the world, you have been exposed to so many disaster emergency areas. How does this compare to famine and all the other natural catastrophes that you've been exposed to?
Humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I have been involved in many humanitarian crises around the world, and let me just say that the complexity of response here was greater than anything I had ever seen before. It was our probably largest in history airlift operation as well as maritime operation, combining the two. We brought in thousands of metric tons. We brought in 10 747 cargo jets. We were moving by heavy truck, by ferry, by barge, however we could move in assets, by helicopter. At one point in time, we had emergency medical trauma surgeons on board a British naval ship delivering assistance to some of the remote islands. We had to be incredibly creative to move assets into the places where there was the greatest need. And I haven't seen that. If you look at other crises around the world, it tends to be concentrated in a specific geographic area. So the tsunami, you look at Banda Aceh, it was in a very limited geographic area. And this was incredibly spread and across many islands and difficult to reach. So it was more complex than anything I had seen in the past. And on top of that, there was, you know, reports of attacks by the NPA.
Yeah.
There was some looting.
Yes.
There was the lack of food, water, electricity, communications. So all of those factors combined made it, you know, one of the greatest humanitarian challenges that I have ever seen. But at the same time, I think that because of the resiliency of the population, that things turned very quickly, that we were able to respond very quickly.
How is it coordinating with the other agencies? You're working with partners, so you have government agencies,
Yeah.
maybe other international partners. How is the coordination?
I think it's really going very well at the moment. Even after the typhoon hit, you can already see that the clusters or the different agencies like UN agencies, the local government are really, they were really like meeting every day and trying to assess the situation and where should we be positioned and things like that.
Yes. Well, I think media played a very active role here. Everyone suddenly is an expert on storm surge or different types of, maybe different types of levels of this typhoon levels. What would you say in terms of your work? How has the media been helpful with you? You must have daily updates at least.
Yeah, can I take that? Because it's, the media is essential to our response.
Yeah.
if the news doesn't get out about what's going on the ground, then the political will and individual donations do not come in. So, I mean, it's important how we engage with the media is critical. In those first few days, 24 hours a day, we were doing interviews. It's a critical part of what I was doing as a country director, and then we had others, including April, who were doing interviews, BBC, CNN, Australia, around the world. We use a follow the sun methodology, which is we are doing interviews wherever there is active media around the world. So we frequently weren't sleeping. I don't think your viewers probably aren't aware of how important the media is to getting assistance to our population.
And you're still needing that assistance. At the moment, you Save the Children is running different international and local efforts. Tell us, April, can you tell us?
Yes, well, at the local level, we're having an appeal, and you can actually find it on www.typhoonyolandaappeal.com. And you can see there, you can donate, and you can see how much money has been raised at the moment.
Locally.
Yeah, locally. This is locally. And you can also find us on Twitter. That's at PH Save Children, and on Facebook, which is fb.com/SaveTheChildrenPH.
So what is the response been? I'm just curious, do you see more young ones? Is there a mix of generations responding to your social media or your different kinds of media?
Yeah, there's really a mix. You can see like adults and youth trying to get into you and trying to reach you to find out how they can help and what sort of assistance do we need. So it's really an overwhelming response from the public, and we've been very, very thankful to everyone who have supported Save the Children's efforts on the ground.
Well, it's wonderful to have groups like you, because I think many people want to be there on the ground to actually help, but you don't want to cause more trouble, and the other thing is there are groups like yourselves that we can really rely on to provide that aid. So thank you very much for being with us today, and definitely we'll be going on your site to find more information and hoping to have you here on the show again.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for being with us tonight, and when we come back, we will be joined by a representative from a bread company that has been helping the victims of Typhoon Yolanda. News Cafe will return after these messages. When Typhoon Yolanda hit the Philippines, particularly the Visayan region, it became the unifying factor for countries to come together and help our grieving country by providing aid in the form of services and donations in kind and in cash. However, with the ongoing investigation on the pork barrel scam, many people have cried for transparency and responsible use of these donations. The clamor for transparency resulted in the creation of the Foreign Aid Transparency Hub, or FAITH.
FAITH is an online portal of where calamity aid and calamity assistance given by donor countries and intergovernmental organizations. It's precisely for this part, for Yolanda. But the move is essentially, it's a transparency measure. We want to make sure that we disclose information on the assistance and whether cash or non-cash is provided to us. Because we want to make sure at the end of the day that the money given is spent precisely for the victims of Yolanda, and that we are actually responding to the needs based on what is needed on the ground. So from our end, we will make sure that the status of how funds were used will be shown in the website. So we're actually in the process of collating data, getting data from DSWD, NDRMC, DOH, and CFO on how the money or in-kind was used. But for the part of the citizens, I think this is where they can come in, because if you go to the FAITH website and you click on a specific country, there's actually a commenting function. If you have a Facebook profile, you can post a comment, post a video or a picture. If in fact you saw that donation come into your municipality or into your city.
However, Faith does not monitor every donation that goes to the victims of the super typhoon.
Some donor countries or some international organizations actually channel the funds directly to the LGU, and we won't be able to get information from them. Another one, and a big chunk of the fund actually, goes to participating agencies, for example, of the UN. They have UNICEF and the Philippine National Red Cross. They also receive funds, but we won't be able to actually check where it went, how they used it, how much they actually got, unless they are able to provide information, disclose it, because we won't be able to compel them, given that they're not part of national government.
When it comes to monitoring and ensuring that there is transparency all throughout, Department of Budget and Management Project Officer Ivy Gail Ong has this to say.
I would like to encourage citizens to be to examine the data in the Faith portal, to check out what kinds of donations have already come in, what was pledged, what was received, and then if they start seeing the status of donations, we want them to be citizen auditors, essentially. We want them to be as protective of this fund, because the moment it went into government agencies, it became public funds. It became Filipinos funds.
You are still watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel, and we are now joined by Mary Ann Cabrera, Corporate Relations Manager from Gardenia. Thank you for being with us tonight,
Hi.
Mary Ann. So, Gardenia has been involved in relief efforts also after Typhoon Yolanda, no? Can you tell us how the preparations were? Because you were preparing for this even before the typhoon hit.
Yes,
No?
yes. Actually, we've been preparing for this as announced in the news, on TV. Well, we instructed our plant to run at full capacity, so we can produce as much breads that we can distribute to typhoon stricken areas like
Yes.
that in Leyte. Yes.
So how many, I heard that your normal production each day is 650,000 loaves a day,
Yes,
huh? So
yes.
you had to increase this by, how many times? Is it about six?
Maybe around maybe 50%.
Yes.
No, 650 loaves that's already the total number of loaves, including snacks and buns.
This is per day for all your products,
650,000
right?
per day. Yeah. All our products, all Gardenia products.
And as of now, how many people have you reached? How many communities?
Well, for this typhoon, we've almost reached all areas affected by this typhoon, like in Panay, Iloilo, Aklan, Antique, also of course, in Leyte,
Yes.
Tacloban, Ormoc, and also Samar. And then we also distributed breads in Palawan, in Mindoro, and of course in Cebu, because we have our own plant there.
And that's about 37,000 loaves.
Yes,
as of
more than
now,
37,000
no? More than a
loaves.
month from Haiyan, you have,
Yeah,
distributed-
that's correct. Since week 1,
Yes.
we've been present in those areas.
Yes.
Because we've prepared for this already.
Now, I know logistics has been a big challenge. How do you distribute? What is your plan of action?
Yes, actually that's the main challenge, the logistics, especially right after the tragedy occurred. Of course, we link up with various organizations, relief organizations like Red Cross, DSWD, TV networks like Solar News, and other private groups.
Yes. So this is how you identify your priority areas also?
Yes.
So how has it been looking at week 1 up to today? Could you talk about some of the challenges? I'm sure there were some difficulties, maybe security issues. What would you say from your point of view the challenges were?
Yes. In terms of security and order, we always ask help from military people. So we're secured since then. No? But of course, the main challenge for us is how to distribute, since our products are perishable products. So the main challenge is how to distribute the breads to the victims at once. So with the help of these various organizations like Red Cross, who have the resources, we're always sure that our breads are distributed on time.
Okay, so there's no fear of some of the bread getting rotten. You know, there have been cases of some relief items just going to waste. Has that ever happened, or do you think, you know, so you ensure that they all reach their beneficiaries?
Yes, because we ensure also that before the breads leave our plant, it is contained in boxes so that it will not be deformed. And of course, it's always baked fresh.
Yes.
So we always have this memorandum of agreement so that they would know, the organizations would know that we require our breads to be distributed at once, once we baked it for distribution to, especially to Leyte.
Right. So you've distributed about 37,000 loaves. How many people do you intend to reach? How many loaves do you think we're going to reach?
Well, for now, as long as I think for as long as they need it, no, as long as we can bring more breads to the victims, no, for as long as the supply of basic commodities becomes normal, and until now, until this time, you know, we're still reaching those communities that need our products, and I think that's it. No, for as long as there is this desire to help, no, that keeps us going.
So this is a long-term plan. This is not just 1 month and Gardenia will stop. So you're meant to stay there for the long haul.
Yes, that's correct. That's
now,
correct.
this is not the only outreach kind of program you've done. I know that Gardenia has been involved in other activities. Can you tell us a little bit about more of your corporate social responsibility activities? Since 2003 or 2004, we have this program. We call this program Feeding Program. Gardenia has always been prioritizing organizations with the same aim as ours, to help curb malnutrition. So we're partnering with these organizations, and through these organizations, they conduct feeding programs. No, our aim for this is to at least improve the health status of these children. And apart from that, we also just this year, as Gardenia's way of extending gratitude to our customers, so giving back to the community.
Stakeholders. No, we give back to community by, of course, they grew with us for the last 15 years. So we have recently conducted the Nutrition Assistance Program, targeting elementary public school children. So there are selected schools, no, that we really tried to reach out to them, no, by feeding them, or at least educating them on the proper nutrition and the importance of having breakfast before going to school. Because as an observation, these children really come to school with an empty stomach.
And they walk for how many kilometers?
From home.
So there is a criteria for choosing.
Yes. So these are the remote public schools. I think that most of the students have a higher percentage of like the severely wasted students. No, so we select that schools with a high percentage of severely wasted.
And how do you measure how your nutrition program is actually faring? Do you see the children later on? Do you see how it's improving their nutrition?
Yes, for the last 3 months, we've monitored them, and it resulted, like, for example, generally, the number of severely wasted students decreased. So we're happy that these children improve their nutritional status, their nutritional...
and improving their lives.
Their lives, of course.
But apart from students, you also do feeding programs for families, so
for
also
families,
communities.
Yes. Communities, yes.
Yes.
We do also nutrition counseling, just educating them about the proper nutrition.
And out of all of these programs, you know, working in the different feeding programs, how is that different from right now what you're doing in Yolanda? I mean, is it very, so right now it's been very challenging. Could you compare, you know, your production of bread, let's say, for relief operations versus the feeding program?
Yes. For this relief, no, like this recent typhoon Yolanda, of course, we almost doubled our capacity so that we can distribute, if not all, but to most victims of calamity. So it was a challenge for us, no, but at least nagagawa talaga namin yung gusto naming mangyari, na makatulong talaga dun sa mga affected.
And of course, in terms of disaster, you also work with the fire volunteers, no? You
Fire
have something
volunteers.
called Response Agad.
Yes.
Tell us a little
yes,
bit
that's
about
correct. This year also, we launched the Response Agad team. This is in partnership with Rotary Alabang, with the aim of, the program was hailed as Response Agad. Just the program itself, that the name of the program itself, it calls for an immediacy of action. So the Response Agad team responds to fire victims or victims of calamities. The Rotary provides their volunteers, while Gardenia, of course, provides the goods and the trucks.
Right. So what we're seeing here from your example is the importance of partnerships.
Yes, importance of
So
partnerships.
your work relies heavily on on partnerships and then helping with logistics support.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
What would you say, looking back at how the last month has been in your relief operations? What are you seeing? What kind of message does Gardenia want to bring?
Yes, I think in behalf of Gardenia, we'd like to, since everybody has witnessed the destruction, we'd like to bring those smiles again in the faces of these victims by helping them, by continuously helping them as long as they need food, no? As long as the basic commodities or supply of basic commodities becomes normal. And we hope and pray that the people of Tacloban and other people affected by this typhoon will bring their smiles on their faces and to live a normal life again, no?
Yeah.
And will soon rise again. So with our desire to help, I think that itself keeps us going, and we will continue to bring goods to them for as long as they need help.
Well, that's a wonderful way to end this year with them. Thank you very much for all your help and all the best to your group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks for being here.
being here.
Well, thank you very much again for all your work. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Join us again next Thursday for another round of discussion here on News Cafe. Sitting in for Jing Magsaysay, I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Good night.